James, welcome to Art and Cocktails. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and congratulations on your new book, The Art of You, which I have a copy here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I am so excited to chat with you. And I'm not new to your work, but for some reason we haven't met earlier. So I guess it's perfect timing for everything. So, for our listeners, could you just quickly tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of dive into your story and the book more?
Yes, so I am an artist and a writer in multiple ways, and I have been all my life. And that's taken many different expressions, from poetry to graphic design. I spent many years working in the advertising industry as a brand strategist. And lately, I've been writing books. The Art of You is my third book. And what a lot of people know me for is my Instagram page, which is Words Are Vibrations. And I make memes and kind of bite sized poems and spiritual insights that are, for the internet. And then my books is where I share my more longer form thinking and ideas. And with The Art of You, it's really my manifesto on creativity and the creative process and really how creativity works. I feel like I've been on the path of a writer, of an artist, of a creator. And now I'm sharing all the lessons that I've learned walking that path and excited to share with others and really to teach creativity and to teach creative expression, no matter what form your art takes. I think that even a business can be an art. Art is any vision that you can manifest into the reality. So that could be a painting, could be a poem, could be social media content, could be a business, could be a dinner party. Like creativity can take all shapes, and the book is really meant to unlock the secrets of the creative process, regardless of the form that your art takes.
I love it. I 100% agree. And I think for creatives who are looking to follow their passion and maybe even monetize, which you do talk about in the book, I think that's one of
Mhm.
the biggest hurdles is when we start to separate the business side or the marketing side from the creativity. Because once I kind of started to embrace and find the flow in the less like artsy side of things and found the art and creativity, like you say, in that it changed my whole life. And I want to go back a little bit and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I feel completely aligned with what you're saying. But you started this book by talking about, and I'll be honest, I have not read your other books yet, but now I will have to because I absolutely love this one. But you started this book by talking about sort of like your burnout in the corporate world and this high paced lifestyle that you were going through. Can you talk a little bit about the courage it took to start focusing more on your project, like even before you made it into a business, even before you became self-employed in your own brand? What was that like for you? What were those baby steps? Like maybe for someone listening who's like in the grind right now and they don't know how to reclaim that creativity in their life, what were some bite-sized steps they can take?
Sure. So, I mean, before I got into the advertising industry, I was already an artist. I was a poet and a writer, and I spent time painting. And then I found myself in this corporate world because I went to school for graphic design, and then that got my foot into the door in the advertising industry. And then I became a brand strategist. And before you know it, I'm like running my own branding team in New York City at this really fast-paced, agency. And it was a blessing because it was a creative job, and I'm lucky to have had a creative career. But at the same time, it was soul draining because the premise of my book is the yin and the yang of creativity. And the first half is about creative yin and cultivating your own creative being. And the second half is creative yang, which is about cultivating creative doing. So being is about becoming a channel and an antenna for inspiration. It's about receiving insights through our intuition. And then the yang is about turning those insights and that inspiration into art. So it's about kind of receiving and then making. And when I was working in advertising, it was so much on the yang side, like much of our society is today. It's all about productivity, deadlines, hustle, working hard. And I was juggling multiple projects at once, multiple clients at once. And it was just, I reached a point where it was just complete burnout. And the first chapter in the book is called The Art of Doing Nothing. And that's really what I learned. I got into things like meditation, and I studied Taoism. I talk a lot about Taoism and the Tao Te Ching in the book, and that's kind of where the concept of the yin and the yang comes from, because these are equal parts of the universe. So for me, it was about really slowing down and listening to my body and spending time in nature and just really giving myself, before I was moving into like making memes and writing books and writing poetry, I really needed to extract my energy from that system of like hyper productivity. And because you need to have I like to say that a mind that's too full of information has no space for inspiration.
Oh, I
So
love
just
that. I
giving
love that.
myself space to slow down and to listen. And when I did that, it didn't take long. It was just like, a few weeks of really slowing down and listening and taking time for myself, that poetry started to come out of me naturally. Like I didn't force it. I didn't even think I want to start writing poetry again. That's just one morning I just kind of was in a state of surrender, where instead of forcing it and, hustling to advance in my career, I just surrendered and let go. And that's when like the floodgates of poetry and creativity opened. And before long I was making memes and, you know, publishing my poetry book. And but it started just by doing nothing, giving myself space to restore my own energy.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's so powerful. And actually, for me personally, it's the hardest thing. I know some people have a harder time starting and doing the work, and some people have a harder time trusting and surrendering and making space. And I'm definitely the person that struggles to like just step back. Let the universe do the work for you and be open, like you said, to creating that space. Was that a challenge for you initially? Because I know a lot of our listeners are kind of high performers and they want like, to achieve all the things in their art career and their business. And it can be really tough to let go sometimes.
Yeah, it can. I think I was trained to, value productivity over rest, like we all are. And but it's I really learned that if you want your work to be good, it needs to be rooted in uh meaning and purpose. And that can only come when you slow down and listen to what that meaning and purpose behind your work is. Otherwise, you're just going to be running on fumes. So I have learned now that the best ideas pop into my head subconsciously. It's not about forcing them or just doing. It's about just, it's like the mind is a garden, or the mind is soil that you have to cultivate in order to plant a garden and for flowers to grow. So it's about watering the soil, giving it sunlight, and then the creativity will bloom naturally, just like a flower. You don't have to force it to grow, you just cultivate the soil. So when you do that, the ideas will be better. So being in a hurry and rushing and forcing, that can often be counterproductive. You give yourself space and you receive the right insight, and that can, that's more of like a collaboration with the universe, as opposed to trying to micromanage and control the entire creative process.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it's almost like the opposite of how we're taught, in art school, you kind of have to work more and like earn your, whatever. And I do believe in obviously showing up and working on our craft, but
Mhm.
to your point, we need to leave space for magic and for, well, in terms of spirituality, like regardless of someone's faith too, it is such a powerful way to surrender. And so here's something that I hear a lot in our community. And it's like, well, I gotta show up and I gotta do this. Do you have any tips for someone who has a hard time letting go? Especially, I notice this in people who are newly self employed. They're like, I gotta launch all the time and do all this. And it can be really hard to step away and trust that. you'll be provided for as an artist or in your business, or opportunities will come. There seems to be like this, I feel like it's like a social anxiety. It's like a communal feeling like we have to do all these things. And I'm sure there's more enlightened people that have kind of transcended that. But I hear this a lot in younger creatives or new business people. Are there any tips other than just having like the baby steps to like take a moment to meditate or go on a walk? Anything else that have helped you learn to trust the process more instead of rushing? I know that's kind of a loaded question. It's
Yeah,
a
I mean, it
lot.
depends. Creativity and making money are different things.
Mm-hmm.
Different things. So what I
Absolutely.
was saying, that's advice to be creative. Now, if you want to make money on your art, there's a lot of different factors that are involved in that. And um and it really has to do with understanding coming from a
Sorry.
brand
That was
coming from a branding background. I think it's really important to when you're running a business, it's important to understand who your audience is
Mhm.
and to make decisions that are aligned with the needs of your audience. This isn't always the case in art, because art is an expression from the soul, right? And art doesn't need an audience. It's a pure expression. But just in my experience working with businesses on branding, on marketing, on all of these things, I think it's so important to really understand who you are speaking to, who your audience is, and really providing for them, being of service to them, and just making it a more of a personal connection, and letting your offerings, whatever that is. I think that there are people who sell their art, who like actually sell their products. There are people that are teachers or coaches that might help others learn how to unlock their creativity or to teach them skills. So there are all types of things you can do on the intersection of art and creativity. So for me, it's always been about, where am I called to serve? Where am I qualified, and um, what message do I have to share, and how does that intersect with what people need?
I
And really
love
finding that intersection of my message and how I'm called to show up, but then also from a business perspective, what do people need? How can I be of service to them? And that intersection is where creativity and business can have a fruitful combination.
I love that explanation. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that is, I think that's the magic space where we all naturally want to serve. We all want to connect and we want to give our gifts, right? So I think there is that space with being creatives. It might not be original art for some people, like you said, it might be education or coaching or products, but there's always that space of something that can come through us that can also support us if that's someone's life path. Thank you so much for beautifully explaining that. What I love about the book is the illustrations, because I
Yeah.
feel like they give a nice visual break as well as a lot of food for thought. Like your beautiful illustrations and art is like really deep and heavy with meaning in a good way. Is this something you specifically created for this book, or was this like a collection of your work from the past?
So the art that's in the book, it was primarily created for the book.
That's awesome.
But I've always juggled writing and visual arts. I've always just jumped back and forth, like poetry and then painting, and then graphic design and then blogging. And then with my books, I really try to be, I spend a lot of time on the internet, as many of us do, in social media, and there's just a different experience of how you consume content. So I just wanted the book to really pop, like to really like be immersive. So you can go deep in a chapter and read and go deep on a subject, but you can also just enjoy the eye candy. And I'm a visual learner, so I wanted to provide opportunity for people to do to learn through graphics and word art and things like that. And yeah, just combining art and writing that's kind of my sweet spot.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. And I really enjoyed it because I like to read in the mornings, and it was a nice kind of wake up for the brain to like ease into both the knowledge and the wisdom that you share, as well as those beautiful visual breaks. Now, what I love about this book is that you share personal stories, like your own journey of
Mhm.
coming from the advertising world to really embracing your poetry and art. And then you also pull in some history and examples from successful people and leaders in the creative fields of different kinds, like writers, poets, musicians. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this research and what role it plays in your life and in your creativity?
Yes, there's a lot of examples and stories in the book. And, I did very little research for the book, but I feel like my whole life I've been researching this just because this is the path I've been on. Like my mentors, my guides in life have been artists of all sorts. Like one of my biggest influences is Bob Dylan. I don't write songs or sing, but like his poetry, like, we come from a similar lineage of poets, like the beat, like from the beat generation going back to Walt Whitman, this kind of American tradition of mystical poetry. So I see like a guide and a mentor in someone like Bob Dylan, who, even though our work doesn't look at all the same. So I'm a big believer in just seeing life as a classroom and being a sponge for inspiration. Even when if I'm gonna like wind down at the end of the day, instead of like turning on Netflix, my go-to thing to do is to go to YouTube and watch like interviews with artists. And this could be like people who have been dead for a long time, or it could be new current artists. But there's so much value because we always consume art. We look at paintings, we listen to music, but there's so much value in learning firsthand from the artist and to see their thought process. So I'm always inspired by that. And I've just throughout my life, I've picked up little stories and anecdotes from all these creators. And the book gave me an opportunity to pour them all into one place. And to me, that's such an honor to be able to almost document, because I just love these artists. Now I've learned so much from them. So just even to be a conduit to share their stories with new readers and introduce maybe new art, old artists to new readers, is something I'm really excited about.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I had a similar experience when I first graduated from art school. I would listen to every Regina Spektor interview because I shared her her Russian immigrant story. And even though I'm in the visual art and she's a singer, I just found so many similarities. And she was almost like a beacon of light for me for many years. And I think every artist should find someone to model in terms of like what values they embody, how they, protect their creativity in this world. And I think it's so fascinating. I'm really happy that you pulled in those fun history lessons. And are there any favorite, you mentioned YouTube, are there any other places that you love to learn more about your role models and heroes or anyone interesting in history?
YouTube is the best because there's so much there. Like you can find all these obscure David Bowie interviews from the 80s and stuff like that.
Love
And
that.
um podcasts are good for new current creators, biographies, biographies and documentaries. So I'm always kind of keeping my eyes open for new documentaries about artists, and then, like, I'll watch those for sure. Um, so yeah, those are some of my go-to. Or not, sometimes you can go to lectures, you can just I just like to go out and immerse myself. So that even it could be mean going to an art gallery, to going to concerts, to going to lectures, and just kind of surrounding myself with that, because I think whatever we consume is going to come out in some way. So I try to consume things that are going to be inspiring instead of just like watching crap TV and whatever, really filling my cup with that creative inspiration.
I think that's awesome. I absolutely agree. And I think that you're right. I think just feeding the mind with things that support you, and even sometimes I'll ask myself to read something completely different outside of my comfort zone to just shock my brain and help me like start thinking
Yes.
differently, because I noticed myself getting in these patterns of like sameness, and I think that's a great way to interrupt that when you feel a little bit stuck.
Yes, I did an Instagram post recently for cheat codes for creativity. And one of them was, in case of emergency, break routine.
I love
And
that.
I'm really a big fan of like introducing randomness into your life. Otherwise, most of us are on this kind of linear, day to day, where we kind of like are watching the same things and seeing the same people and doing the same thing, and it becomes kind of routine. And I love to throw in an element of randomness. And like I used to do is like I would just spend like a week listening to an obscure genre of music that I didn't even necessarily really like. I just wanted to understand it. Or
I
like I
love
went
that.
through a phase in my 20s where I was going to watch all of like like a bunch of French films, or like a bunch of these like even like silent movies with like Charlie Chaplin and people like that, just to kind of understand the territory of movies, of art, of music. Even if it wasn't something I loved, I just kind of wanted to understand it and absorb it and integrate it into my own work in
I
some
love
way.
that.
Yeah.
That's actually a really great homework for everyone listening to break up the routine and explore something new. Now, let me ask you about your kind of daily routine. What
Mhm.
do you do? Could you give us like a day in the life? What does your day look like? Because I love to ask this question of artists and entrepreneurs. It's so fun to just see
Mhm.
how we structure our day.
Sure. So my day is mainly built around my morning creative time. That's the first thing I do when I get up. I try not to schedule any podcasts or meetings or calls before noon, or even before one, because I just like to give myself that unstructured block of time to be in my zone. And I kind of treat my creative process like a spiritual ritual in a way. So I think to a degree, we are channeling the muse. And when we show up with intention and integrity and consistency, I think the muse responds to that and is more likely to come and speak through us. So I have a little office which is my studio, and I make a big pot of yerba mate tea, and I play some instrumental music, and I meditate, and then I start writing, and it really depends on what I'm working on, but more or less I'll just have an open notebook, and whether that's a poem or a meme or a chapter from a book, I really just try to open myself for that inspiration and let it flow through me. And and yeah, I just try to, no pressure, and I just try to listen and see what comes through and jot it down in my notebook. And I really try to be in that zone for at least a couple hours. And then I can and then I'll get, then I can get more busy work done. Like I'll have coffee, and then either like do emails, or like I'll take what I wrote in my notebook, and then I will turn it into social media content, or actually like create the thing. So it's like that morning zone is like my yin time, where I'm in that, with the muse, just listening. And then in the afternoon, I'll go into yang, which is either going to be making the thing that I was working on, or doing podcasts like this, or whatever it is. And then I try to spend time in nature. So then I will walk my dogs, or hike in nature, or walk around the lake here in Austin, and just listen to music and just kind of, get some exercise and be outside and get some sun. And then I'll come back and have dinner with my wife, and then we'll watch something together or whatever it is. And that's kind of the average day.
Sounds perfect. I've also learned to protect my mornings. I feel like when the brain is in that, I forget the wave, whatever that feeling is in the morning, I feel most creative and also
Yeah.
most just interested in everything. And afternoon, I can go through the motions and do whatever online.
Yeah, as soon as like you have calls and meetings and like busy stuff to do, then it's like I try to write when I have that open channel, and then once distractions come in, it's easy to lose that. So I try to make sure you know, um, yeah, strike when the iron's hot in the morning.
I love that. One more question I have about the book, and I'll let everyone else read it themselves. But
Yeah.
one part I really love is about letting go of perfectionism. And I think to a degree, even if you don't consider yourself a perfectionist, that fear creeps up for all of us. And I really love that part where you talk about the song I Can Get No Satisfaction and how unique it came out. Do you have a personal kind of signal or inner knowing when your project or your art is meant to come out in the world? Like, do you know when things are done, or you just like put things out there more casually as you work on them?
Good question. It depends. I try not to over edit things. And especially, in the social media age, and now with my Instagram account, it's like I'm just in the habit of posting every day. So when you're posting every day, you don't have the luxury of overthinking or over editing. And I learned this in advertising because there were so many deadlines that like, okay, well, like let's say we're brainstorming an ad campaign. And we have a few days or a few weeks to do it, but like you need to have the idea pretty early so then you can write the copy and do the mock-ups. So you could turn your wheels for days and try to like question and second guess yourself, but an idea is an idea. And could it be better? Maybe, but it's an idea. And I try not to be too precious with my ideas. We need to get them out. And like, it's okay if they're not perfect. There's going to be more chances. It's like if you're a baseball player, like a really, really good baseball player will get on base like a third of the time. And the rest they're striking out or they're, getting out. So a third of the time is a huge success for a baseball player. And it's kind of like that for creativity. It's like you have to, especially on social media. You got to put stuff out. Not everything's going to go viral. Not everything's going to be hugely successful, but it's about getting that momentum. And I think when we try to too hard to perfect and control, we can end up sucking the life out of something. It's like that Rolling Stones example. That is what happened was the Rolling Stones recorded I Can't Get No Satisfaction, which is probably their best known song, and it was just a demo, and their manager released that demo to the radio, and then without the band even knowing, the radio stations were playing it, and it became a huge hit. So they never finished the demo became the final version. But there's something about that raw energy where sometimes, if we try too hard to polish and perfect and edit something, it becomes more formulaic. So there's something about that spirit in the moment where it just, that's why when I'm writing poems or writing memes or whatever it is, I try to let the words flow out of me without censoring them and just letting it be what it is and having a little bit of that raw, spontaneous essence to it. Because I think that is like there's something relatable about that.
I love
If
that.
something's too perfect and polished, it almost becomes hard to relate to it. So I try to
That's
be more real than polished.
I love that. And it also goes back to the examples you were sharing about how we love like the hidden interviews and like the behind the scenes artist songs that no one heard. We kind of crave that rawness and that unpolished, authentic spirit. And I had a similar thing happen where I think this was back in 2016. I posted like a daily painting. I was doing daily paintings, and this was like a little tiny 9 by 12. Like it took me probably 10 minutes to do it. It went viral and it kept going viral for years. And it's still sometimes like a big account will post it. And that was such a lesson for me to not overthink it. Not everything has to be a grand production, though some projects, obviously, we have like the intention to make it something more. But it
Mhm.
was such a lesson. And I'm sure you had many moments like that with your art as well, where something just resonates with the world for whatever reason, and you can't control it. You can't replicate it. There's nothing you can do. It was from another dimension.
Totally. I totally agree.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, James. This was so amazing to get to know you. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about the book, where they can find it, how they can work with you, and anything else you have going on right now?
Absolutely. And again, thanks so much for having me on. Uh, the Art of You is available now, and it's really a guidebook for creativity in all forms. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, it's really going to break down the creative process with stories, lessons, inspiration, rituals, and help you understand your own creativity and creative process better. And you can find it if you go to Words Are Vibrations, my Instagram page. You can go to the link in my bio. There's all the links, all the different stores you can buy it from. Um, and then you can also there's also links in my bio for how to work with me. I do one-on-one consultations for creatives, and links for my podcast and everything are in there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show, and congratulations on another wonderful book. And we can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you so much. Great chatting with you.